You have found the Open Eclectic podcast, where Nate and Josh talk about everything from mobile games to books to pet peeves to cars to toys. Our interests run eclectic and we're open to more. Welcome to the Open Eclectic. Welcome back to the Open Eclectic.
Welcome back, everybody. Here for what would now be episode 3.
Unless you're counting the initial pilot from the old show as like a bonus content, and in that case, this would be episode 2.
Right. Have we decided if we're going to split the first one into multiple, like 2, or are we just going to leave it as a...
Just leave it as a monster.
An LP?
Yeah.
So if you got some time on the weekend, or you're a long-haul trucker or something, you need to stay awake, listen to us.
Ice Road Trucker fans of the Open Eclectic, sound off.
Yes. So, Josh, we're going to start with comic books tonight.
Comic books.
I feel like just kind of on the surface here, surface or whatever, that's probably not the right word. My snapshot impression would be that, knee-jerk, maybe that's it, would be that you probably have more experience with comic books than I do. I have a pretty limited exposure to them. Obviously, I've known about them, forever. I wasn't like, I didn't live in a bomb shelter for my, formative years or whatever. Anyway, so I've read, let's see, it's a very small list. I've read some like Batman collections.
Okay, which one?
I think Long Halloween, actually. That was actually one you recommended to me. We were working together at Nelnet at the time, and I think I went and bought it at like Barnes & Noble and read that, and that was pretty good. I think that's actually the only Batman one I've read.
It's a good one, though.
I should go back and read it again because it's been a long time. Because that has a lot of like really old... No. Does that have... Because see, this shows how little I know about this stuff. That's like its own like standalone story arc, right?
Yeah, it is. You don't need to know anything about any of the characters. Anything you need to know, they kind of tell you, and it's kind of the there's a term for Batman where he's called like the Great Detective and that kind of thing, or whatever. But most of the time, you don't ever see him doing any detective work. It's like, Batman, the Great Detective, and he's like, "That's right, with my fist in your face," But the Long Halloween is a good example of his intelligence in a lot of ways, and that detective aspect a little bit, if I remember correctly. It's been a very long time since I've read the Long Halloween. I remember that it was one that I really liked, though, because there was a lot of kind of different characters and villains in the Rogues Gallery that come out to play.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember anything from it. But I think what it was is why I initially started saying like, does it have old stuff in it? Was because I think at that same time I like maybe checked out from the library the very first, a collection of the very first issues of Batman. So I was like, oh wow, this is the beginning.
Like the 30s Batman, or like
the 40s maybe, something like that. But anyway, okay, so that's what I read for Batman. I read Watchmen, which I really liked that, actually.
That's phenomenal.
I mean, yeah, I really like that. I like the movie. I saw the movie first. But I also really like the graphic novel. And then the other main comic that I have read is Walking Dead.
How far did you get in that? Because that's pretty lengthy.
Oh, man. I mean, do you want spoilers or do you care?
Well, like, how many volumes did you get
through? I checked it out from the library, and so they had, the really thick, the
the
collection.
omnibus.
Yeah, or whatever.
Omnibus.
Yeah.
Omni?
I think it was like, I think it's Omni. It was at least 2 or 3, real thick collections of the comics.
Yeah.
And because I had started watching the show first, and I was a big fan of that, and big fan of zombie, stuff in general, and so I read through it and I finished, what was there, and then I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna keep up with this. And I think shortly after that, I also quit on the show because I'm just like, man, I'm just burnt out on this. I can't do it.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is like you got to end it you got to have like an end goal in sight.
Right.
And I feel like with The Walking Dead and some of these other ones, that's why I liked like The Long Halloween and Watchmen. It's like a self-contained volume that you can sit down and read and enjoy, and then that's it. And even the stuff that continues on, because I read Usagi Yojimbo, which has been written and illustrated by the same guy for like 35 years, something like that. Like even those are kind of different in a way because they're standalone stories. It's not like this continual thing where you have to have read them. You could pick up any volume of that and read it, but like The Walking Dead, it just...
Because Walking Dead is, I mean, it's all, like you said, Batman. I mean, obviously Batman's been around for a really long time. Yeah. And you could read through the comics in order, but like with these collections of, these story collections, graphic novels, whatever, you don't, like you said, you don't have to know everything that's happened previously. But yeah, The Walking Dead is like, it's all one story, and it just keeps going on and on and on, and it's always like, oh my God, we're survivors. What do we do? Oh, hey, we found this place to live, and we have food and shelter, and and then, oh my God, all these scary people come. Oh, we got to fight and kill. Oh God, and then the zombies come, and then we got to move on. We kill those people. They kill some of our people. We kill a bunch of zombies, and then we move on to another place, and we start it all over again. There, there's some like, at one point they like fast forward in time, and so like Carl. Coral. It's not really a spoiler. No, he's like older, and I think he's like running the show. See, I don't even know, because like, I mean, I can't even remember. Like, I was just kind of like so done with it, and I didn't keep up with the show. Like, I'm probably like, I don't know, 3 seasons behind now, and I just can't do it, man.
That's how I felt about, I was watching Game of Thrones for a little bit, and there just came a point after like the first season, or maybe the second season, I don't even know if I finished it. I was just like, I can kind of see how this is going to go. I don't know that I need to watch any of the rest of it, because it's just kind of like crunch on.
Did you watch the rest of it?
No. I was just like, I think I'm done.
So I had actually started... I hadn't seen the show at all. I started, the very beginning with the books, the first one. I didn't get past that, and I read quite a bit of that first book, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool, but then I just kind of put it down, got into something else, and never went back to it. And I eventually watched like a couple episodes of the show. Again, I mean, it was good, but I'm just like, I don't, Yeah. I know that's like counter to what
there's so much going on. What I realized that I want, and I think this would actually work really well in comic book form, maybe not to do this with the show or the books, to chop them up this way, but to make like a comic book of Game of Thrones. But what I want is for the first volume or whatever to like follow maybe the main events in the book, and then sprout off so that your whatever comic book you're reading only follows one character. Because I found that there were some characters I just didn't care about, and I'm like a completionist. When I start a book, I finish the book usually, or I stop reading it altogether
because you hate it.
But with Game of Thrones, I was just like, I really want to like flip through and find the next like chunk of the story with Arya or with Jon, and I only want to read those chunks, and the rest of it I just don't care about enough. Or the Imp, and so I think that would be like a cool project for somebody who's not me to go through and like write the first whatever, like the hook volume of Game of Thrones as a comic book, and then suddenly you're like, okay, would you like to follow this character's story arc?
Choose your own adventure.
It's like a choose your own adventure, or you could like read all of it for the whole picture,
Sure.
For the completionists. But if you just want to follow along with this character's story arc, great, here you go. Like, that's what I want. Is that a thing already?
I think, well
I'm
sure on Wikipedia, so I searched Game of Thrones comic. I don't know if the choose your own adventure, that's probably not a thing.
Yeah, probably not.
So.
Can't get that lucky.
I know you said somebody that's not you,
Yeah.
but looks like it's graphic novels. It tells you they have a Making of Game of Thrones graphic novel volume 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of them. It gets to Clash of Kings graphic novel volume 3.
Huh, interesting.
Well, that's not even out yet. It's supposedly coming out in October. But that's a good idea. So like you can just follow a character because there is, George R. Martin is
So many characters.
so wordy and so many words and things and yeah, like the books are very thick.
He's like the Tom Clancy of the fantasy world.
Right. Yeah. That's I think I'd read like 120 pages of the first book, and it was good. Like it was good, but I don't know.
It's like it's a commitment to read.
Yeah,
those books
for sure.
They are written great, and don't get me wrong, it's very epic fantasy and stuff. But just I don't know. I kind of fell off that wagon real hard.
And he's still not done with it. The show, obviously, and apparently, since I didn't watch it, this is great. I'm just like speculating here on the podcast. Like, I don't know what the hell happened.
Based on news headlines that I've read, here's my opinion.
But like they ran out of actual source material at some point in the show, and then they had to kind of make their own thing, and the quality kind of like dropped off, right?
That's what I heard. I haven't heard anybody who's been like, "Oh yeah, that last season just the best."
Yeah, and like the last season, like the ending, like the last episode, people were just like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, nobody was. Even the hardcore fans were just suddenly like, "Oh, I don't know."
Then
I don't watch that show.
There was like, what was the controversy from that? Not controversy, but just stupid internet crap. Like someone noticed there was like a catering coffee cup.
Starbucks cup.
Was it an actual Starbucks cup?
It was a Starbucks cup, and I just like
when it first aired, in the first airing, like the original airing, it was in there, and then they digitally took it out for like the...
People were freaking out about it and stuff.
Oh my god!
It's like, it happens,
Oh my god! I can't... My suspension of disbelief is ruined! My immersion is gone!
Right. I think if that's your threshold for that, then... You were looking for an excuse to get out.
If you like comic book guy from The Simpsons, it's just like I just hate everything and point out what I hate about it. I think you're right. It's like, that's always kind of the fun little things. You get together and watch a show, and you're like, oh my god, look at that, or you're like,
like in Friends, there's like a reserved sign on the table for a long time or whatever, and I don't know. I think those are more like fun little Easter eggs than errors of continuity.
Exactly, right? It's like, I don't know if that just the internet, like people just like
I think it's like
the mob mentality. They just pile on, and they're just like, oh, look at this mistake that the show made. They're so terrible, but I'm still gonna watch it.
Well, that's like an interesting question of like toxic fandom, and that's like a phrase that you hear a lot about now. Man. And I'm a Star Wars fan, so I get to see a ton of that. And what
was the girl? Sorry, I'm cutting you off. What is she Korean? One of the characters in the new movies that she got really like a lot of backlash.
Yeah, Kelly Tran, or
she was like, what was her character?
Her character was Rose Tico.
Yeah, her.
And yeah, she got so much crap. Like she personally did, and I don't understand that. Like. It's a job.
Right?
She's paid to get on screen.
It's a character.
Let me just think about your favorite franchise for a second here. And like just think about if you had the opportunity to be in that franchise, even if you had to say like the stupidest stuff to be in it, like I would do it.
Wait, so is she like a super fan of Star Wars?
Well, isn't everybody? Fight me, internet.
So
Kelly Marie Tran is her name, and she played Rose Tico in the new Star Wars movies. And yeah, her character was just so hated, and I don't know.
So, and I guess it doesn't really matter if she's Korean or whatever ethnicity she is, but I don't know. So I guess maybe the reason I brought that up is like, did she specifically get hatred because she wasn't a white woman, basically, or
that's a little fuzzy to me. I was under the impression,
or is it just that they disliked her character?
That it was because of her character. According to Wikipedia, her nationality is, quote, American. So, probably has, kind of where you're from, not necessarily
your ancestors,
like the difference between your culture and your heritage.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, that's like a great example of just toxic fandom right there, where it's like, the people who complain so loud, that it freaks out Lucasfilm or whoever, but the rest of us are like, listen, is she the greatest character? No, not in my opinion. Do I think that Kelly Marie Tran deserves like death threats because she portrayed a character in a movie? No, I don't.
No, I mean, it's crazy. It's like people wrap up so much of their identity in these fictional universes and fictional characters. Something else in my perusal of Reddit that I've come across, people were talking about, like, speaking of like toxic or obsessive fans, is K-pop, like K-pop bands.
Yeah,
like the fans of these groups and are just insane, basically. And
K-pop is insane, so I'm not surprised.
I have not been exposed to that at all, so I don't.
Just Gundam style. That's my experience.
And like this Reddit post, it was something along. It was one of those like Ask Reddit things where it was like, I don't know, like what's a toxic fan base or something like that. I don't know if it was as on the nose as that, but anyway, they were talking about, one of the answers was K-pop, and they talked about it. The fans were bad, and then also just the way that the lives of the actual artists, the actual performers, are like so tightly controlled, and
interesting.
Like, they can't. Man, I don't know, like they can't have relationships, like romantic relationships, because it would anger the fans too much or something. And like
so they're a commodity.
Like their lives are just like yeah, they're like managed like down to the minute. And there's I don't know, it's wild. I have to, maybe there's a documentary I can watch. I don't know.
Probably. I think that's kind of like a weird thing of we have a mutual friend who's big into Spider-Man. That was his like childhood go-to thing and stuff, and he's making comments about how he's really glad that they shifted from this thing to this thing. I don't remember what, something to do with the web shooters. I guess in one of the movies they make Spider-Man's web shooters like an organic part of his arm. It's like he generates the web.
Yeah, wouldn't that be part of the spider bite and all that?
Yeah, it could be. But in the comics, he was just a really smart guy who had like the super strength, and he was going with the Spider-Man thing, so he made it, and he like scienced it out. And I was just like, let's keep in mind that you can't point to a comic book and say this is canon, because the comic books as they go contradict themselves too. The whole
what?
Yeah,
they
like
do?
The whole Batfleck thing where they're like, Batman doesn't kill people, and I'm like, listen, the Kevin Conroy Batman the Animated Series Batman is, for me personally, my definitive Batman, okay? But let's not pretend like Batman doesn't kill people. Like Michael Keaton's Batman killed a few guys. Like
he did?
It was pretty. Yeah, he's like on a rooftop and he knocks a guy off the freaking roof. You tell me that guy lived? I think not.
Or Batman's all like, it's all technicality, like he, the guy's like just injured, paralyzed, and like Batman goes and checks on him, like, okay, he didn't die. Perfect.
Nope, didn't kill him. Or like the original Batman carried a revolver and just killed people.
Wait,
like
Adam West didn't kill people?
No, that's not the original Batman.
Comics.
Like comics, okay. way back,
because he was more of like a gumshoe detective turned bat guy.
Well,
no.
The Adam West is like a good point. It's like there's all these different types of where it takes the same basic premise of an orphan with issues dresses up as a bat and goes out to fight crime, and like the way they do that is like a sliding scale from the Punisher to the Adam West Batman. And it's like, well, there isn't like a definitive version per se. Christopher Nolan's Batman did stuff that like comic book Batmans don't necessarily do, and he was very detective-y sometimes. And, it just,
yeah, he like used a lot of like fancy tech, and they showed that off,
Yeah.
quite a bit in the Nolan ones, and I don't know, more so maybe than like the Keaton ones. I mean, those were just like we're still campy, but we're darker.
Yeah, I mean,
And he had some cool tech.
Tim Burton movies.
They're just wild.
They totally wild. Like apparently, so they're like my favorite story about the Tim Burton was is he apparently had his driver's license revoked for speeding. Tim Burton did, and so he was he had to be driven everywhere, and he was like, "You guys got to let me drive the Batmobile." And the studio was like, "Heck no, man! You don't have a license. We are not. Do not." And they told everybody. Everybody was like, "Under no circumstances that man get in that car. Understand? Or else." And he snuck onto the lot in the middle of the night and like took it for a test spin anyways. I was like, heck yeah, I would too.
Sweet.
Fire me. Worth it, man.
I mean, you're the director, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
That's the thing too, where like the second Tim Burton Batman movie doesn't feel like the first one, but it's directed by the same guy, and it's like a direct sequel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they contradict each other a little bit. So just, I don't know. I guess I don't have a problem with watching a movie and being along for the ride. You know, you don't, if you want.
It's the best way to do it, man.
Yeah. If you want to read your comic book and, break it down and have like this story as your definitive version of that character, that's fine. That's just like your opinion, man. Like I said, mine is Batman the Animated Series. I would defy you. I would say even the like the short film that they did that they released in theaters, that Batman Mask of the Phantasm, 100% the best Batman movie ever made. It establishes the characters very quickly, efficiently. There's emotional like weight to what's going on in the movie. Fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
I'm gonna have to add that one to my list. So talking about definitive Batman, for me, I didn't have a lot of exposure to the comics. I didn't read a lot of the comics. I didn't watch the animated show when it was on. I've seen maybe a few episodes. I've seen some of the animated films.
Some of those are great.
Yeah. And so for me, I think the definitive Batman, initially it was Michael Keaton for me.
Sure.
Just because that was Batman when I was a kid. And I think now, what I think of when I think of Batman, I go to the Chris Nolan Batmans, the Christian Bale. And that's just, I'm sure there's listeners out there, there's thousands of them. And they're like, no, that's the wrong Batman,
Yeah.
But and that, like you said, it's just opinion, or it's just what's in your heart, it's what you decide, and it's like, or maybe you can have multiple Batmans, or you can appreciate them all as kind of as their own thing.
There's a lot of cool nuance in just I think that's what I appreciate about some comic books is when they like incorporate that nuance a little bit so that you can kind of have the freedom to decide maybe this one's for you, maybe it's not for you. Usagi Yojimbo is definitely a lot different than what a lot of people think of as comics, which is like, Iron Man, Batman, kind of the main staple things. But I love being able to find something that's like off the beaten path just a little bit.
Sure.
And they just do whatever the heck they want because they're not trying to be like all the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that's kind of true with like when you're starting to pick when people pick their Batman, they have so many reasons that kind of weigh into it.
Right.
There's the nostalgia thing. My buddy, Mike, I thought for sure he was like, I don't know that I care for the Christian Bale Batman that much. He's like, they're great movies. I'll watch them over and over again. Fantastic stuff in them. It's just like, he was like, for me, I prefer Keaton. Even today, I prefer Keaton. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, man.
Keaton was pretty badass.
Keaton freaking killed it.
As Batman.
You know what I loved about Keaton too? So he is, you know what? I gotta go to the internets. What I find interesting is Keaton's not a big dude, right?
Yeah, he's not like he's not necessarily like imposing, right?
Yeah, he's just in general, he's not he's 5'9".
Did he like get into like super duper shape for the movies that he did? Because Bale, obviously Bale, method actor, is like,
well, yeah,
I'm gonna become Bruce Wayne / Batman.
Yeah, so like they don't try to hide Keaton's stature in the movie at all. Mm-hmm. He's just 5'9". And that's it. And they just leave it at that. You can tell in some of the scenes, like, he's a little shorter than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I loved about that version of Batman and Bruce Wayne compared to, say, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. RDJ is not a terribly tall dude either. I think he's taller than 5'9", I would wager to say. But they put him on, like, platform shoes. They want to make them... Oh, yeah.
I mean, they do that a lot. They do that a lot in showbiz.
And it's fine. That's not a criticism necessarily. That's
yeah. I mean,
I'm not paying to see something completely real. I go to a play for that.
So like before they had movies, movies were plays. So speaking of like big height differences, I know this is a tangent. We can get back, to comics, but I promise this show has comics. The X-Files, my beloved show, The X-Files.
Yes.
David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, Mulder and Scully.
Smoking Man.
Yeah. Morley's. There's a big height difference between Duchovny and Anderson. Probably between Anderson and a lot of people because she's not
really
she's
tall.
Not,
right. No, or
she's not
she's
very
really
tall.
short.
Yeah, she's short.
Oh, it's been so long.
Duchovny, he's over. I mean, he's a basketball player. He's over 6 feet. So I mean, my point is that they would put her on. She'd have to stand on boxes and stuff a lot. But who cares? Like,
yeah,
her character is still badass, and Jillian's also a badass.
Yeah, well, in terms of cinematography, it makes sense.
Yeah, because it's
convenient to have.
You get them in the shot, and their heads are the same level. You don't want to have you don't have to like pull back because one person's head is up here, and the other one is a foot shorter.
Yeah,
and I mean so that's been going forever, the whole time since they've been making films and TV
I'm a
shows.
pro movie magic guy. I just it's just one of those things where like they didn't care that he was short. They were just like, you know what? Sure, why
we'll
not?
Go with it.
Let's go with it.
And I wonder if was that like a conscious decision that they made, or they're like where they're like, you know what? I'm like, let's just go with it. Was Burton just like, you know what, Keaton, we're gonna put this apple box away. We don't want you to stand on it. We just want you to be.
I don't know.
Be you.
When we have Tim Burton on the show, we can ask him.
Oh, okay.
Whenever that happens.
Sure. Tim,
there's 6 degrees of separation, right? So like somebody out there knows someone who knows someone who knows someone that we.
Tim, our people we'll talk to your people, okay?
Yeah.
Yep. So look out for that. So we're going back to you talking about RDJ and Iron Man. So he was like, and he's got a freaking like suit of metal. I mean, he's got a robot basically around him.
Right, and so like when he's in the suit, it's a little easier because you can kind of fudge that.
Because they just put him in a dark room with like light on his face, and then they CGI all the crap. And I mean, it's not a knock on RDJ either, but it's just it's an interesting point, interesting little tidbit that I didn't know that that they didn't attempt to movie magic the height differences with Keaton.
Yeah. And you know what they did do a lot of movie magic for height stuff was with Frodo and Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. They are not. Frodo is
he's a normal sized person.
Is a normal sized person, which is weird when you watch something else with him in it because you're like, why is he so big?
Have you seen some of the like making of the way they set up some of those shots with? So this isn't Lord of the Rings, but it's like the same concept and the same like techniques was Elf.
Yeah, forced perspective.
Yeah, all that like it just blows my mind when you watch like when you see pictures or like little clips from the set where it's not actually the film, and you're just like holy crap, that's like.
It's not just that they do it; it's how well they do it too. Because forced perspective, like, so after watching some like the behind the scenes on things and stuff, I was like, I could do that. I could do that. I'm gonna do that.
Sure.
And I've tried it, and I try every year. There's a time of the year where I usually try it. I didn't this year because it's pandemic and stuff.
Sure.
But there was I usually try to do some forced perspective with my toy photography, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard.
I mean,
to get that.
The contraptions that they set up to make it like, and you have to line it up just right because otherwise it's gonna look, it's gonna look not right.
Yeah.
But man, kudos to all. In a different life, man, I would love to have worked in TV, film. I mean, that kind of stuff would have just been
right.
You still could.
Still could.
You still could, man. Maybe I will someday.
Yeah. Coach, you put me in that game.
Coach,
back in '97.
I could throw the football over those mountains over there. Napoleon. Oh man. So I've talked. We started out. I was talking about like comics that I had been. My experience with comics. You had actually. So you had gotten. You've only mentioned like one.
Yeah. I'm a big Usagi Jimbo fan. Some people might remember this Samurai Rabbit from the old '80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle show. He was a character on there that crossed over periodically. And actually those comic books themselves cross over too. So there's a couple of editions where the Ninja Turtles are there in anthropomorphic Japan. And it's funny because in the show Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they don't wear clothes, right? So they just have like the belts because they're turtles, right?
Right, the belts and the little masks they put on.
Yeah, but in Usagi Yojimbo, it's just animals in Japan that walk around. So they wear like, samurai clothes.
So it's like BoJack Horseman.
And yeah, and so like when the Ninja Turtles come up, people are like, "Why are you naked?" And Usagi's like, don't be rude."
What?
It's great.
Wait. So the turtles don't wear clothes
No, well they didn't at first. I think they realized that there's like a difference, and so they kind of got put their clothes on or whatever. But yeah, it's great.
Quit showing us your shell and undershell.
Right? Oh, the shell.
Oh my god,
dignity. So yeah, I read. I'm through like 3 or 4 volumes of that.
And you said this has been like 30 years or something?
Yeah, it's been going for a long time. It's one of the longest continuously running.
And it's a rabbit?
Comics, yeah. So the story is that the artist Stan Sakai wanted to do a comic book based on the life of Miyamoto Musashi.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page while you read this, just fact checking you here.
Oh, that's good.
I'll let you know if you screw up.
All right. Yeah, so as a kid, this guy, he's part Japanese and grew up in Hawaii, and he was just obsessed with the culture, and he wanted to do this comic book based on Miyamoto Musashi, who was a famous samurai in Japan and stuff. And he just, from what I've heard and from the interviews I've seen, he was like, yeah, I was just drawing it, and I couldn't get it to come out right, and I was never happy with the drawing. And then he was like, just as an exercise for fun, I thought, well, what if I had like a Ronin rabbit, and his ears were tied up in like a top knot, and it really just kind of slapped with him, and he went with it and has made a career out of it.
Wow.
So yeah, it's fantastic. So I read that. I've read a bunch of Batman here and there. Long Halloween specifically stands out. I've read No Man's Land, which is where like Gotham City is hit by a huge earthquake, and so the United States decides to just cut Gotham off, basically.
What?
Because Gotham's like an island in this story, and so anyway, it's like a lot of cool crossovers, and Superman shows up to like start the power up again in like a generator. And then it highlights the difference between like Gotham City and Metropolis. And in Gotham, if you do that, people are going to like swoop in and take it over and then sell the power. Whereas in like Metropolis, people will be like, of course, we should work together and make this a better place.
Except for Lex Luthor, right?
Well, but he's like a corporate bad guy. Is
Hostile
he a bad
takeover.
guy? I don't even know. So I've read that series in comic book form, which is pretty long. Watchmen, and so I've actually read some off the beaten path comics too.
What's okay, real quick, before we get to that, so there's another Batman graphic novel, one that's highly recommended to me that I still haven't read, by my friend John from work. It's called The Killing Joke.
Ooh, that's
have you read that?
Yeah.
That one's from like the perspective of like one of the Joker's goons or one of his henchmen or whatever.
Maybe. You know what? And now that I'm saying this, I think I've only seen the adapted movie they made of that.
Oh, okay.
And so it is really good. So that's actually really good. And from what I've read, it follows really closely.
Okay. Yeah, he like that one is like, I guess is really, I mean, obviously the Joker has no qualms about killing people. So
that's like a grown up. That's
like
an adult comic book.
Kids,
that's
kids don't read that. Don't read that till till your parents say you can.
Yeah.
18, 16.
You know,
Whatever.
parental discretion is
Yeah,
advised.
yeah.
So I've read some of that. I don't dabble in Marvel comics too often. No real reason why. I never have. Just
I've read some, like, so I don't want to make this a list of everything that I've, read, but I'm just, now that we're talking, I remember that I have read a few, like, just like on Comixology, like they'd have like free comics, and so I'd be like, sure,
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll take all of them because they're free. Like I read, it was like an Iron Man one, and another one that I was trying to get into was Constantine.
Oh yeah,
comic, because
was that Marvel?
Dark Horse.
As Dark Horse, okay. Well, so
Is that Marvel?
I'm gonna say it was Dark Horse, and I think it got bought by Marvel.
I don't know.
Because like Blade used to be Dark Horse also, and then he got bought by Marvel, and so now there's like mashups of Blade and like probably the Punisher. I don't know. I haven't actually read them, so I'm kind of
Frank Castle and Vampire?
right. Yeah,
Whoa.
I don't know. Sounds
That
like
would
a
be
good
pretty
time.
sweet. I'd read those. And you had given me, was it called Year One? Is that what it's called? Or
Batman Year One?
No. This isn't like a superhero one. It's like a comic. It's like its own thing. It's like the end of the world kind of thing, and like some apocalyptic event happens, and this guy, like,
I gave it to you.
yeah. Was it? Gosh, what was it called? It's just like a normal guy, and his mom calls in. Like when you start reading it, his mom like calls him like, "Oh, you're gonna come up to Washington D.C." and exactly like that. And he comes up there, and then there's some cataclysmic event. People get sick, or they start going crazy and start killing other people or something, and then he like gets knocked out and wakes up, and he's out on the street, and there's just like nobody around. I think he had a pet snake too. No? You gave this to me.
Are you sure I gave it to you?
Yeah.
It's not ringing any bells, but it sounds kind of awesome.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, it's not a superhero thing. It's like, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to find it and I'm going to send you a picture.
Do that. Interesting.
So I started reading that. I can't.
Good for me, giving you a comic book. Look at me go.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, sorry. You continue with what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like, there's like the kind of the big names that everybody knows, Marvel, DC, and then of course Dark Horse kind of is the dark horse in that race. But then there's some newer comic book publishers that have come out called IDW or Image Comics, and they just kind of, not to throw too much shade at Marvel and DC, but also definitely to throw shade at them. Like the artists don't retain ownership of the stuff that they make. It's property of Marvel and DC, which is like a publishing thing, basically. And nowadays we kind of look at that and go, "Ah, yes, standard practice." But think of it from like an artist's perspective, how terrible that would be. You create this thing, but it's not yours anymore. It's theirs, and anything you make while you work for them is not yours. It's theirs, and that kind of stuff. And so there's some independent publishers and comic book people who got together and were like, let's make our own stuff. And they did, and it's fantastic. So I read a bunch of this comic called Saga, which is like a space thing. It's like a space opera thing, which almost makes it sound like it's Star Wars-y, but it's not at all. I've read a bunch of the Manhattan Projects, which is about the Manhattan Projects, but like with a sort of sci-fi twist, like extra sci-fi. And then one of my favorites that I love some of the elements in it so much that I incorporate elements from this comic into like our RPG campaigns is The Sixth Gun, which is about 6 guns. And each gun, it's like a Wild West fantasy series. So like periodically there's monsters and that sort of thing, and various magic and that sort of and whatnot. And there's these 6 guns that are really powerful, and people who know about them are all chasing them,
searching for them.
But yeah, so those are really good. I encourage people to like check out IDW or Image if you need something that's not like superhero-y and a little different. And then recently I was at the comic book store up in Omaha, and I picked up the comic book version of 47 Ronin.
Okay.
And if you think it's going to be like the Keanu Reeves movie, you are mistaken. There's a lot less supernatural stuff in there, but it's illustrated by the same guy who does Usagi Yojimbo, which is how I heard about it. But it's a nice little one-shot thing, and it's like a Japanese. I don't know how to describe it adequately, but it's very important to a lot of the culture. And they say that to know that story is to know Japan. And so that kind of intrigued me a little bit.
Which one? 47
Ronin.
Okay. Check that out.
Yeah,
there's tons of them.
Yeah.
So speaking of like independent comics, there's a place here in Nebraska, in Omaha, called Omug Comics.
Omug? Okay.
And my friend and boss Jeff, he's familiar with them and has worked with them. He does some podcasting stuff. He does Mega, Make Eternia Great Again, the He-Man stuff. But anyway, so he's told me about Omug, and there's a comic they do called Lenny Vernon Badass Trucker. So that's they've done some really cool stuff with that, and they're local and obviously independent. So check them out too. And I mean, what you're talking about with like the company owning stuff, I mean, I think that's probably the way, most of the industry is probably like with creative type things, artists, writers, probably magazine, people like writing for a magazine or doing that. I mean, I guess don't listen to me. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't know how that, unless they have it in their contracts, I'm sure, if they retain ownership of their creative works things they come up with, I'm sure like, tech companies, you invent something, and the company sells it, sells the technology or whatever. I'm sure that's their property, doesn't belong to the people who made it.
It's just, I think it was some guys who like wanted to make their own stuff and own it,
which is understandable. I mean, because it's like, you create something, it's yours. You want to keep that with you. You don't want the company to be like, that's awesome, cool. Well, give it to us now because it's ours.
Well, like I want to say Nike had like an internal design competition for their new logo, way long time ago, and like that's how they got the swoosh. And it was just some lady who submitted it, and they were like, yeah, the winner gets $500 or whatever. And people have asked her later and been like, yeah, do you think you should get more money because of that or see profit? And she was like, no, I knew what I was doing. I worked for a company, and they said, design a new logo for us, and we'll give you this bonus, not...
So she was an employee of Nike.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I could be wrong about that, but that's my understanding. But, it's a little different when you're employed by a company to do a thing.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's...
Them, but,
if you're employed to help design a fighter jet, I mean, that does that, like... it feels like the same kind of thing, and it but that seems to like make in your head like makes more sense. Like, well, yeah, I'm like, what the heck are they going to do with a design for a fighter plane? Become a villain or something in a comic book?
Right.
But with artistic stuff, that does, I think that, well, you could argue that designing the plane is also artistic.
Absolutely.
And it certainly, there's artistic elements and in design things and that they make it look cool, but it's also obviously functional.
It's a matter of perspective, and it's kind of just a matter of what you want.
Sure.
Like one of my favorite authors is he basically funds his books on Kickstarter because he wants to be able to distribute the ebooks of his works at his discretion.
Okay.
So like when you buy a book directly from his like site store, he'll comp you the ebook most of the time. So like he's like, all right, yeah, you paid with a credit card and your email receipt, and he's like, here's an EPUB copy of the book.
Oh, so you buy the physical copy, and he also gives you an EPUB.
Yeah, or he wants to be able to like, he's typically a fantasy author, and he wrote a sci-fi-ish book, and he wanted to give out the first like 2 or 3 chapters of the book. Well, if you went with a mainstream publisher, they wouldn't let you do that because it's their property when you sign over with them. And so he found like a really small publisher who would produce the book for him, and he fundraised for it on Kickstarter and that sort of thing. And He was like, nah, I want to be able to have the freedom to do things that I want to do and not have to worry constantly that I'm going to get in trouble with my contracts or anything. And
sure. And that's the ideal situation for everybody. It's like, I want to be able to do my own thing, set my own rules, and
that's what Image, or I think Image Comics, when you buy comics, digital comics from their website, they send you like DRM free files.
Sweet.
Yeah, and their philosophy and somebody else's, a couple of authors that I like, they're like, piracy only hurts bad material. Like when you start appreciating what you're reading, you want to buy more of it, and you'll do that. Mm-hmm. And if you share the comic book with somebody and they get hooked on it, great. That means our readership just went up. That means our potential for profits just went up. And,
sure.
It seems to have worked well. There's like a TV show now based on Invincible, which was one of those independent comic book things, and it's going very well, it seems.
So that's not the M. Night Shyamalan movie. That was Unbreakable. That's not Invincible. Yes. Okay, whatever.
Invincible is an animated thing.
Yeah. So I was way off on that. So going back to that comic I was trying to
Did you figure out what it was?
Figure out. Way off. It's called Why the Last Man.
That wasn't from me.
That wasn't from you?
I didn't give that to you.
Are you sure?
I'm 100%
I swear
certain.
You gave that to me. Anyway.
But I've heard of, because I haven't read any of that. I've heard about it, and it's like about the last man on Earth, basically, right?
Yeah, he's literally the last man on Earth. Yeah, I thought he had a pet snake. It's a monkey.
Yeah, a little different.
Yeah. Anyway.
So he's Ross Geller?
Yeah.
From Friends?
What was the name of the monkey?
Marcel, maybe? Yeah.
It's a capuchin monkey. Is that the same monkey? Yeah.
Probably.
Anyway, so I had started reading a little bit of that, and it was pretty cool. But then, as I tend to do, I slacked off, and
I feel like there's a ton of editions for that too. Like it's a very long running
comic book series,
reasonably long.
It's monthly issues 1 through 55, bi-monthly issues 56 to 60. Oh, seems like it's been going for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I should probably finish that one of these days. Anything else about comic books?
I think comic books are a valid form of media, and I like how they've gotten more respect in the last 5 to 10 years with all the resurgence of comic book movies and people going back to the source.
Definitely.
And that sort of thing. But it's just like I was saying with the movies, like, don't take them too seriously. I mean, there's sometimes heavy topics covered in them, but
yeah, I think they're not afraid to approach timely, insensitive, important topics in some of their issues.
So one comic that I highly recommend you check out, I totally forgot about it until we were talking about like heavy issues. There's one that I read a couple years ago called Mouse, Maus, and it's the artist. Some of the artist's story is like in it, and he talks about how he his dad was a survivor of like a Nazi concentration camp. And like he had like a really rocky relationship with his dad, and all this kind of baggage stuff that gets put in there that he talks about and outlines it very well, but much better than I'm giving him credit for. But there comes a point where he's like, I realize that I don't understand my dad because I don't understand what he went through. And so he started having him tell him his story, and he wanted to put it down and illustrate it and stuff, but he just couldn't. He was like, it's too much, it's too graphic, and he didn't want to do that kind of comic book. And so he wrote it so that all of the Jews are mice.
Okay.
And all of the Nazis are cats. And all of the Poles, I want to say, are pigs, maybe? Anyway, it's really, really well made. Like the power dynamic of like cat and mouse versus like the Nazis and the Jews really goes very well with the stories. And it doesn't feel disrespectful like something could easily.
Sure.
This isn't like a Mickey Mouse version of it. It's still pretty serious. People get shot and get killed.
It's not a light, just cheeseball version.
And even though it's a it's a comic book, it's a cartoon on paper, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a Saturday morning slapstick cartoon. It's still the material's treated very well, but it's also, I don't want to say tame enough, but restrained enough that people who are really sensitive to kind of more extreme materials could still read it and not be put off by it.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, it's really good. There's 2 volumes.
Check that out.
And it's great.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. Going back to what you said about, comics are a valid form of media. Not just like stuff that idle kids and teenagers waste their time on, and it has no more importance than just wasting time or passing time. And I think I'm coming more to appreciate kind of that viewpoint about it, just in what little I've read. It's, and not that I necessarily had that or had this misconception or this preconceived notion about comics, like, oh, it's just silly, like you said, cartoons on paper. It's still like reading it initially, I'm just like kind of having to like get my mind around that, where even, yes, it is animated, it is a comic, which, the stereotype about it, that it's just this pulpy, nonsense. It's just kind of getting into that mindset was interesting. Just kind of being able to read it like I'm reading a book,
yeah.
or I guess give it the same respect, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm rambling and I'm not making a lot of sense here, but
it's a valid form of literature.
Yes,
where you can,
that's a perfect thing for it. It's a valid form of literature, and
it slides from just ridiculous kind of slapsticky Garfield and Snoopy all the way
right.
to superhero stuff, to
just like anything, just like
47 Ronin,
television shows,
Mouse. Yeah,
movies. I mean, they all have that same, even books, like
yeah.
just text. They have the same. It's all stories. I mean, you're telling stories, and again, I was saying this poorly and rambling, but I mean, there's no reason to give comics any less respect than you give to an attention than you'd give to a movie or a TV show or an actual book. I mean, you can gain, like you said, there's some that are just corny and slapstick and just for fun, and others can be more serious, like Mouse. Yeah. You could learn something from it. You could get a perspective that you didn't have before. Comics are cool. Just like anything else, check them out. Yeah, I don't know if you heard of these comics. Check them out.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find the Open Eclectic on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and MySpace. Want us to ramble on about something specific or have a comment on what you just heard? Send us an email at theopeneclectic@gmail.com. We now have a Ko-Fi if you feel like supporting the show. That's ko-fi.com/theopeneclectic. Or support the show by leaving us a review. Thanks. We hope you'll join us again next time on The Open Eclectic.